Then came the Prohibition era, which focused on alcohol. Shortly after, the feds began to track and vilify people who struggled with addiction, especially if they were black. Fast forward to 1971, when Richard Nixon declared war.
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse.
2 presidents later, Ronald Reagan not only carried on, but weaponized this anti-drug stance.
Drugs are menacing our society.
Though Reagan was the first president who promised to
make America great again.
But rather, he made things worse for low-income communities. In fact, at the time, the poverty rate grew faster in the first 3 years of Reagan's presidency than in any other time since the 1950s. Meanwhile, in another part of the world, the United States was funding an illegal war in Nicaragua, and drug smugglers were sending cocaine to the U.S. on U.S. planes. Somehow, the United States officials had no clue.
Whether the United States actually loaded up the planes with cocaine, or whether they just kind of turned their backs, right, and let the planes take off and go to the United States to land, the United States knew that at the very least that cocaine was being flown.
Almost a rail train effect to the way we're practicing law. These cases are on an extremely fast track. Decisions are made very quickly about the case. Most of these cases do not go to a preliminary hearing.
Remember how hard crack and even drugs hit the streets in the 80s? And did y'all ever wonder where it came from? In this interview, I'm about to show y'all Gary Webb will expose everything there is to know about how the CIA trafficked drugs into our country in the 80s. Listen up to the video.
Operated along the west coast of the United States throughout most of the 80s. And they were funneling, they were selling cocaine in South Central. They were also selling it in Oakland. They were selling it in San Francisco. They were selling it in San Jose. And some of the money they were making was going to support an army that the men who ran the cocaine ring worked for, called the FDN. This was an army that the CIA started in 1981 and supported.
Better known to us, most of us who remember, is the Contras in Nicaragua. So go right ahead.
The men that were running the cocaine ring were top officials of this Contra army. And what we found was that they were selling this stuff in South Central, which is predominantly black section of Los Angeles, immediately before the outbreak of the crack cocaine epidemic. They started selling powder. Tons and tons and tons of powder cocaine was going into this one small area of the city. And from there, they sold it to Freeway Rick. And Freeway Rick took the powder, turned it into crack, and starting in 1983, 1984, began distributing it to predominantly the gangs, the Crips and the Bloods in Los Angeles.
Don't y'all remember how hard crack and even drugs hit the streets in the 80s? And did y'all ever wonder where it came from?
I talked to him 2 days before he died. I talked to him every day. I'm the one who, because I had got out on bail, so Gary came to visit me in Compton, in L.A., to get some discovery from me. When the CIA dude came, I remember giving Gary all the information, so Gary wanted to get who me and Rick was, so I'm telling him this whole story. But while I'm telling this story, the newspaper article came out, not the book yet. So he was like, and I'm like, man, you're not scared for your life? I'm not scared. Like, Chico, I'm not scared, but I understand. I'm like, man, because people have knocked at my door before that. I'm like, who the fuck is this? Like, once the article came out, it was a 3-page article about what happened.
Times.
No, LA Times wouldn't do it. And the San Jose Mercury News.
Okay.
It was a 4-page article. Shows everything. He was right on point. But the LA Times come out a week later with the same kind of 4-page article saying that this didn't happen. So they discredit Gary. So you're talking about LA Times, Washington Post, Washington Times, and New York Times and the Washington Post discredited him. So now he looking like an idiot. Like his editor, they fired him. Right. Now they discredit this whole story like he made it up.
So that's pressure from the CIA.
Pressure from the CIA. Like they end up letting him go, man. Like I'm talking to this man every day. Like Chico, there's people on my back pole. I don't know who they are. They've been here for 3-4 days. Like, damn, man, be careful. So 3 days later, I get a call from my daddy. Did you see what happened to Gary? He shot himself twice in the head. The man told me, Chico, I'm never going to kill myself. I'm never going to do that. I talk to this man all the time.
Wow.
I know his whole lifestyle. I know his wife, his kids, and everything.
Yeah.
So he received a lot of pressure from different situations. I was on the show with Gary Webb on the Gerardo, Montel Williams, and some other show, because when I had got out, I was only out for like 3 or 4 months, but I was doing all these shows with him. Like Gary, they wanted me to do the show. Like Geraldo came on there, like, this is the person responsible for the whole crack epidemic. Him and Freeway Rick, pointed at me. At first they had a baby come across the stage that this lady sold her baby for crack. They said the person responsible for it is right there, Chico Brown, and his crying me Freeway Rick is in prison for that. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I'm asking Gary to answer the question. My lawyer ended up asking the question, but Gary was like, Gary knew he had it right.